He stood on a stage of black marble, bathed in a spotlight, holding a glass of Bollinger champagne. This was Dante Russo's coronation. He had won the divorce, he had won the $100 million, and he had won the narrative. He smirked at the Vogue editors in the front row, a picture of triumph. He raised his glass to toast his new fashion empire, built on the ashes of his cold, controlling marriage. Then the giant screens behind him flickered. The music died, and the face of his ex-mother-in-law billionaire CEO Madeline Hayes appeared. She wasn't there to congratulate him. She was there to execute him. The world first came to know Dante Russo through the lens of a paparazzi camera on a beach in St. Bart's. He was all sharp angles and sun-kissed olive skin, his arm draped possessively around Serafina Hayes. The headlines were brutal billionaire wallflower snares, Italian stallion. Serafina Hayes was the antithesis of her name. In a family of fire-breathing corporate titans, she was quiet earth. She was the sole heir to the Aura Tech global fortune, a $50 billion empire built by her mother, Madeline. But while Madeline dominated Bloomberg terminals, Serafina haunted museums and funded archaeological digs. She was kind, brilliant, and in the eyes of the society pages, hopelessly plain. Dante was not. Dante was a masterpiece of Milanese genetics, a struggling model who understood his true currency was not on a runway, but in the private salons of the ultra-rich. He met Serafina at a fundraiser she was hosting for the preservation of Venetian art. He hadn't known a single thing about the art, but he spoke passionately about the soul of the canals, his dark eyes fixed on hers. She was charmed. He was efficient. Their marriage, 6 months later, was the event of the season, a $10 million affair at the family's Newport estate. Madeline Hayes watched the proceedings from the front row, her face an unreadable mask of polite neutrality. She had run a full background check on Dante, of course. It was clean, almost suspiciously so. No criminal record, no debts, just a string of wealthy older patrons. He was, in her professional opinion, a high-functioning parasite. But Serafina, for the first time in her life, had been defiant. She was in love. Let her be in love, Madeline, her own lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, had advised. Just make sure the prenup is ironclad. The prenup was a fortress. Dante Russo signed it with a flourish, his smile never wavering. He knew a fortress could be sieged. Life as Mr. Serafina Hayes was for a time perfect. Dante became a lifestyle influencer. His Instagram, once a sparse collection of headshots, exploded. He was Dante Russo, reclining on a yacht off the Amalfi coast. Dante Russo front row at Paris Fashion Week. Dante Russo curating a dinner party in their $40 million Fifth Avenue penthouse. He didn't just wear the clothes Serafina's money bought. He personified a life that millions envied. He was charismatic, charming, and utterly devoted in public. She is my muse, he'd tell Vanity Fair, my anchor in a world of shallow beauty. Behind the scenes, the performance was exhausting. Sarah, darling, he'd say, scrolling through his feed, this botany thing you're funding, it's not sexy. No one cares about Amazonian fungi. Serafina would look up from her research, her brow furrowed. It's not supposed to be sexy, Dante. It's a key compound for a new anti-malarial drug. But the optics, my love. He'd sigh as if explaining a complex theory. We need to be at the Met Gala, not digging in the mud. We need to be a brand. Serafina was a brand. The Serafina Foundation was one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the world. It built schools, funded medical research, and operated with quiet, ruthless efficiency, a trait she had inherited from her mother. Dante, meanwhile, felt the gilded cage tightening. He was an accessory, a beautiful, expensive, and ultimately powerless Fabergé egg. The prenup was absolute. In the event of a divorce, he would receive a one-time payment of $1 million for every year of marriage, capped at 5 years. A pittance. He was determined to change the terms of the deal one way or another. He began his campaign subtly. He started to advise Serafina on her foundation's investments. "This PR firm you use is ancient," he said one evening, swirling a $1,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. "They don't understand social capital. You need someone aggressive, someone who can place you." He introduced her to Bianca Wells. Bianca was a shark in Chanel, a PR maestro who specialized in reputational management. She was all teeth and compliments. Serafina disliked her instantly, but Dante was insistent. "Just a consultation, my love. For me." Serafina, ever the peacemaker, agreed. This was the first and most critical mistake. Bianca Wells didn't work for Serafina. She worked for Dante. And through her, Dante began to meet people. Not just influencers, but bankers, private equity types, men who understood that lifestyle was just another asset class. He began to build a world separate from his wife. He started having business lunches that lasted until cocktail hour. He spoke of synergy and vertical integration. He was building a case. And Serafina, busy funding a new water treatment facility in Peru, was too preoccupied to see the scaffolding being erected for her own downfall. The true fracture came at a tense family dinner. It was just the three of them, Dante, Serafina, and Madeline, in the Hayes' starkly modern dining room overlooking Central Park. Dante cleared his throat. "Madeline, Sarah, I've been working on a project, a new venture." He slid a glossy, leather-bound proposal across the table. On the cover, a single stylized R. "Rus Esso," he announced. "A lifestyle brand. Fashion. Hospitality. A new members-only club in Soho. It's time to leverage the Hayes Russo name." Serafina stared at the proposal. "Dante, this looks like it cost $50,000 to print." "You have to spend money to make money, darling," he smiled. "I'm projecting a $200 million valuation in 3 years. I just need the seed capital. $50 million. There was a long silence, broken only by the chime of the grandfather clock. Madeline Hayes placed her fork down. She hadn't even opened the binder. "No," she said. Dante's smile twitched. "I'm sorry." "No. Auratech Global does not invest in vanity projects. And the Hayes name," she said, her voice dropping a degree, "is not a brand to be leveraged by a club. It's a global leader in biometric security and quantum computing." "This isn't your decision, Madeline." Dante snapped his mask, slipping. "This is my life. Our life." He turned to his wife. "Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked at the R logo. She thought of the $50 million she was trying to raise for her Peruvian project. "Dante," she said softly, "I can't. The foundation needs that. People's lives depend on that." Dante stared at her. The two women, mother and daughter, are united front of cold, hard no. He saw it then. He would always be the outsider, the court jester. He threw his napkin on the table. "You," he pointed at Madeline. "You've been poisoning her against me from day one." He turned to Serafina, his voice dropping into a tone of deep theatrical hurt. "And you're just a coward. You'd rather stay a boring little librarian under her thumb than be a queen with me." He stormed out. That night he didn't come home. The next morning, Page 6 had an exclusive. Dante Russo moves out of penthouse. I need to breathe, says model husband. The war had begun. The divorce was not a legal proceeding. It was a PR war, and Dante Russo had hired the best general. Bianca Wells mobilized her network with terrifying speed. The narrative she crafted was a masterpiece of victimhood. Dante wasn't a gold digger. He was a creative soul suffocated by old money. Serafina wasn't a philanthropist. She was a cold, passionless woman manipulated by her tyrannical mother. Madeleine Hayes wasn't a CEO. She was a dragon guarding a treasure she didn't deserve. Dante is devastated, Bianca told People magazine in an exclusive interview. He tried for 2 years to build a real life with Serafina, to bring joy and passion to that mausoleum of a family. But they don't just want your love. They want your soul. The leaks were constant and strategic. Paparazzi whom Bianca had on retainer caught Dante looking forlorn outside a rented Soho loft, carrying a single artfully distressed leather duffel bag. He was photographed seeking solace with other models, beautiful, sympathetic women who would pat his arm as he bravely told his story over Negronis at Carbone. Dante himself gave a masterful performance. He was booked on The Dialogue, the podcast de rigueur for celebrities wanting to launder their reputations. It was suffocating. Dante said, his voice a perfect husky blend of sadness and strength. You know, people see the money, the houses. They don't see the isolation. I proposed a business, a way for us to build something together, something of our own. And they treated me like the help. The podcast host, a woman known for her pseudo-intellectual takedowns, was putty in his hands. So you were creatively suppressed. Dante laughed, a hollow, tragic sound. I was erased. I was a walking, talking handbag. I finally had to make a choice. Do I die there a beautiful decoration? Or do I leave with nothing but my integrity and try to build something real? Nothing but his integrity became the rallying cry. A #FreeDante hashtag trended for a full 48 hours. He was the modern man, a creative force being crushed by an archaic matriarchy. While Dante played the public martyr, his legal team, also guided by Bianca, launched a brutal private assault. They contested the pre-nup. The document is unconscionable, his lawyer argued in a closed-door mediation. Mr. Russo was coerced. He was young in love and manipulated by a family with legal resources 1,000 times his own. Madeleine's lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, a stoic man who had been with the family for 40 years, was unfazed. Your client signed it counselor. He was advised by his own counsel, whom I recall we paid for at his request. But Dante's team had a surprise. They weren't just arguing coercion. They were arguing fraud. My client, his lawyer announced, was promised a true partnership. Instead, he was systematically excluded from marital assets. Furthermore, and here he produced a stack of documents, we have found evidence of financial impropriety within the Serafina Foundation. Serafina, sitting next to Kincaid, felt the blood drain from her face. What my client in his advisory role discovered a series of irregular transfers, funds moving from the Foundation's general account to a shell corporation, Nautilus Holdings, based in the Cayman Islands, a total of $12 million unaccounted for. Serafina was speechless. She looked at the documents. They were real. Her signature, or a very good forgery, was on the transfers. Mr. Russo was so distressed by this, the lawyer continued, his voice slick with faux sympathy, that he confronted his wife. She told him to mind his own business, fearing for his own legal exposure and heartbroken by this betrayal of the public trust. He felt he had no choice but to leave. It was a brilliant move. Dante wasn't just a victim of a cold marriage. He was a whistleblower. Serafina was reeling. "Arthur, I don't know what this is. I never—" Kincaid put a hand on her arm. "Be quiet," he whispered. Madeline Hayes, who was conferencing in, spoke for the first time. Her voice was pure ice. "You are accusing my daughter of embezzlement." "The documents speak for themselves," Dante's lawyer said. "My client naturally wants to avoid a public scandal. He is prepared to sign a very comprehensive NDA and let this unfortunate matter go away, in exchange for a fair, revised settlement. Let's say $100 million. It was extortion dressed up as a divorce. "Get out," Kincaid said. "You have 24 hours. Dante's lawyer smiled. "Before we are forced to discuss this with the DA and the New York Times." When they were gone, Serafina broke. "Mother, I swear, I never— How is this possible?" Madeline was silent. She was looking at the Nautilus Holdings document. She recognized the typeface, the specific formatting of the wire instructions. She had seen it before. "Arthur," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "Cancel my meetings. Get me our forensic team. Get me everything on Dante Russo. Every text, every email, every bar tab. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he used for the last 2 years. She turned to her daughter, whose face was ashen. "Serafina," she said. It was not a question. "Did you know about this?" Serafina hesitated. She looked at the floor. I saw an email from our bank in Zurich about a Nautilus account a few months ago. I asked Dante about it. He said it was a discreet account for a new high-risk, high-reward donation. He said he was handling it to surprise me with the returns. He had me sign some papers. He said they were just standard tax forms. The naivety of it hung in the air, thick and poisonous. She had been so desperate for him to be a partner. She had walked right into his trap. Madeline closed her eyes. She had built an empire by anticipating every move, every threat. And the most significant threat had been sleeping in her daughter's bed. "This is no longer a divorce, Arthur," Madeline said, opening her eyes. "This is a war, and he has just given me the justification to use a nuclear weapon." But for now they were trapped. A public trial would decimate the Foundation's reputation, even if they were innocent. The DA would launch an investigation. The scandal would be the only thing anyone remembered. "Pay him," Madeline said, the words tasting like acid. "Madame Tuchel," Kincaid was shocked. "Pay him. The 100 million, draw it from the legacy trust my father set up, the one I can't touch. Let him have his victory. Let him believe he has won." "Mother, no," Serafina cried. "Serafina," Madeline said, "when you are fighting a monster, you do not wrestle it in the mud. You let it gorge itself on the bait, and you wait for it to wander into the trap." The settlement was signed. Dante Russo was $100 million richer. The media went insane. He had done it. He had cracked the uncrackable Hayes family. Bianca Wells's PR statement was a masterpiece of magnanimity. "Mr. Russo is pleased to put this painful chapter behind him. He wishes Ms. Hayes nothing but the best and will be making a significant anonymous donation to a charitable cause. Dante Russo, the whistleblower, the victim, the man of integrity had won, and he couldn't wait to tell the world. Victory was intoxicating. Dante felt reborn. The $100 million wasn't just money. It was a scorecard. It was validation. He had faced the haze dragon in her lair and walked away with a significant portion of the hoard. He woke up in his Soho loft the morning after the settlement wired, and the sunlight hitting the exposed brick felt different. It felt earned. His first call was to Bianca Wells. "We did it, mia cara," he said, stretching like a panther. "You did it, Dante," she cooed. "You played the part beautifully. Now phase 2, the reinvention." Phase 1 was purging. He returned every gift Serafina had ever given him, the Patek Philippe, the vintage Aston Martin, the custom-made suits, in a very public display. A Page 6 photographer just happened to be there as a bonded messenger service loaded boxes outside the Fifth Avenue penthouse. The headline, "Dante's Declaration, Russo returns golden handcuffs." He didn't, of course, return the $100 million. Phase 2 was the flaunting. He flew himself and a close circle of new, ridiculously beautiful friends to St. Bart's on a private Gulfstream G650. The models Irina and Katia were draped over him in every photo he posted. The captions were all about freedom, authenticity, and living my truth. He was photographed in Saint-Tropez, driving a newly purchased white McLaren, the license plate a custom Russo 1. He was at the Monaco Grand Prix, a regular on the yacht of a Russian oligarch. The press, fanned by Bianca, ate it up. He wasn't just a rich divorcee. He was a mogul in the making. GQ ran a fawning profile. From muse to mogul, Dante Russo steps out of the shadows. The article was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Sitting in the lobby of the Hôtel de Paris, the writer gushed, Dante Russo is the picture of relaxed power. He sips an espresso, not a hair out of place. For a long time, he says, his voice a low melodic baritone, I was defined by who I was with. I was an accessory. He leans in a conspiratorial glint in his eye. But an accessory is just a beautiful object. I am a creator. I had to fight for my freedom, and now I'm going to use it to build something that lasts. The article detailed his vision for the Rue SSO brand. It wasn't just a fashion line. It was a philosophy. It was unapologetic luxury. The crown jewel of this new empire was the flagship store. He had secured a 10,000 square foot space in a historic Soho cast-iron building, the one he had coveted for years. The lease alone was astronomical. He's burning through that settlement, Arthur Kincaid noted dryly to Madeline, presenting a weekly report. Let him, Madeline replied, not looking up from a quarterly report on Aura Tech's satellite division. Give a fool enough rope, Arthur. Dante wasn't just burning the settlement. He was leveraging it. He was now a man with $100 million in liquid assets. He was, for the first time, bankable on his own. He walked into a meeting with a high-powered private equity firm, West Third Capital, and pitched his Rue SSO brand. He was electric. He was the brand. He had the looks, the followers, the media narrative, and most importantly, the skin in the game with his own $25 million commitment. West Third Capital, known for its aggressive plays in the luxury market, was impressed. They agreed to a $75 million seed round. Dante was ecstatic. He now had $175 million on paper to build his empire. He hadn't just beaten the Hayes family. He was about to supplant them. He was going to be the new name in New York luxury. He began the build-out of the Soho store, a monument to his own ego. It was all black marble, smoked glass and polished brass. A giant 4K video wall was installed, intended to play a loop of his lifestyle campaign shot in Milan. He poached the best staff from Tom Ford and Gucci. He planned the launch party. It would be the event of the fashion calendar, a statement of his arrival. The invitations were thick black cards delivered by hand. Vogue was confirmed. The New York Times Styles section was coming. A-list celebrities were promised. Bianca Wells was a whirlwind of activity. "This isn't a store opening, Dante," she told him, checking swatches. "This is your coronation. By the time this night is over, no one will even remember the name Serafina Hayes. You will be the story." He loved the sound of that. As the date approached, his arrogance swelled to operatic proportions. He started to believe his own PR. He was the creative genius. He was the victim who had bravely escaped. The $12 million he had siphoned from Serafina's foundation, the act that had bought his freedom, was a distant memory, a minor bit of smart accounting. He had framed her, yes, but hadn't she deserved it? She and her mother so cold, so superior. They thought he was stupid. They thought he was just a face. He looked at his own face in the mirror of his new sprawling bathroom, the face that had launched 100 headlines, the face that was now worth 9 figures. "You're not just a face, mio Dio," he whispered to his reflection. "You are an empire." He was so busy admiring his reflection that he never saw the shadow in the corner. He was so focused on the party, the cameras and the adulation, that he never once stopped to ask the most important question. Why in all these months had Madeleine Hayes said nothing? He mistook her silence for defeat. He mistook her stillness for surrender. He had never been on a safari, had never seen how a lioness hunts. She doesn't chase. She doesn't roar. She waits utterly still for the prey to become so drunk on its own freedom that it wanders right up to her, offering its throat. And Dante Russo was practically skipping toward the kill zone. While Dante Russo was painting the town red, Serafina Hayes was in a self-imposed exile at the family's stark, beautiful compound in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. She had not handled the divorce well. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was humiliated. She had been played not just by a man she loved, but by her own naivety. The Nautilus Holdings fraud, the $12 million he had stolen by tricking her into signing the transfers, was a wound that festered. It wasn't the money. It was the violation. He had used her trust, her work, as a weapon against her. She spent her days on long, punishing hikes, trying to sweat out the shame. She had stopped painting. What was the point? Her whole life had been a forgery. "He's on GQ," she said one evening, her voice flat, holding up her phone to show her mother who had flown in for the night. Madeleine glanced at the cover, Dante, in a velvet blazer, smirking. "It's a magazine, Serafina. It's designed to be thrown away." "He's winning, Mother. He's being celebrated for destroying me. And you paid him." The accusation hung in the crisp mountain air. "Yes," Madeleine said, sipping her tea. "I did. Why didn't you fight? You're Madeleine Hayes. You don't lose. You don't settle." "The foundation was at risk," Madeleine said, using the same logical tone. "A public fight would have jeopardized its charter." "The DA. I don't care about the DA." Serafina exploded, the first spark of her old fire returning. "I care that the man who stole from us, who framed me, is being called a mogul. He's using our money, my money, to build a temple to himself." Madeleine regarded her daughter. The pale, quiet girl was gone. In her place was an angry, wounded woman. Good, Madeline thought. Anger is a motivator. Grief is a boat anchor. You think I paid him, Madeline said, and that was the end of it. Wasn't it? Serafina, you run a global foundation. What is the first rule of crisis management? Serafina sighed. Control the narrative. No, Madeline said. That's PR. That's what Bianca Wells does. What is the first rule of power? Serafina was silent. You never, ever fight a war on your enemy's terms. You never fight on their terrain, and you never fight when they choose. You let them build their monument. You let them announce their victory, and you wait for them to overextend. Madeline walked to the window, looking out at the Tetons, sharp and unforgiving in the twilight. He thinks I'm an old woman grieving her daughter's broken marriage. He thinks I'm a CEO, too busy with Auratech to bother with a small-time con man. He has forgotten who I am. She turned back to her daughter. The $100 million from the Legacy Trust. It was bait. I wanted him to have it. I wanted him to be rich, arrogant, and most importantly, distracted. Distracted from what? From me, Madeline said simply. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. Arthur Kincaid has been busy. While Mr. Russo has been posing for magazines, we have been digging. She laid out a series of key corporate structures. Nautilus Holdings, the company he used to frame you. He was clever. He routed the money through 3 different jurisdictions. Cayman, then Cyprus, then to a bank in Zurich. We know this, Serafina said, impatient. It's a dead end. The account is empty. He used it all as his money to get the West Third deal. He thought it was a dead end, Madeline corrected. But he made a mistake. He got sloppy. He used the same incorporation lawyer in Zurich to set up Nautilus that he had used 3 years ago for... What was it? She consulted a paper. Ah, yes, a shell company called Apex Global. All it ever did was receive 1 wire transfer for $50 and 0 an email from an Apex Global account. The recipient, Bianca Wells. The subject line, Phase 1, complete. The date 3 days before the Nautilus transfers began. Serafina's breath hitched. What is this? This, Madeline said, is where the hunt really begins. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to frame you. This was a plan, a conspiracy. Apex Global was his war chest. And he and Bianca Wells planned the entire divorce, including the whistleblower narrative, months before he ever stormed out of our dining room. But how did you find this? Dante is a creature of habit. He thinks he's a wolf, but he's just a fox. He always goes back to the same hole, the Zurich lawyer. We didn't just investigate Dante. We investigated everyone he ever spoke to. Bianca Wells, his new investors. Madeline smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator that has just smelled blood in the air. And who? Serafina asked, her voice a whisper. Our West Third capital. Ah, Madeline said. That is the most interesting part. They're a PE firm, very aggressive, very new, and according to their SEC filing, their primary limited partner, the source of 90% of their operating capital, is a holding company based in Luxembourg. And the name of that holding company, Madeline said, tapping the final document, is Patagonia Equity. I've never heard of them. You have, Madeline said. It's the private experimental investment arm of Auratech Global. It's my company. Serafina stared, comprehension dawning like a cold, bright sunrise. You. Dante Russo didn't walk into a meeting with West Third Capital, Madeline explained. He walked into a trap I had been setting for 6 months. I own his investors. I own his seed money. I own him. But the $75 million, you gave it to him. He's paying for his own launch party, Serafina. He's using my money to build his store, my money to hire his PR girl, my money to buy his stupid McLaren. Every receipt he signs, every check he cuts, is just another nail in his own coffin. Serafina sank into a chair. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was total. He thinks he's a mogul, Madeline continued, but he's just a middle manager in a company of one, and I am the CEO, the launch party. That's his performance review, and I'm afraid he's not going to get a good one. What happens now? Now? Madeline snapped her briefcase shut. You get on a plane. You're going to Peru. That water treatment facility you were building, the one he tried to sabotage, it's opening. I want you at the ribbon cutting. I want you to be photographed doing your work. Be the woman he tried to erase. And you, I, said Madeline Hayes, am going to New York. I have a statement to prepare. The long, cold silence was over. The hunt had ended. The execution was about to begin. The night of the Rue Esso flagship launch was electric. A cold November rain lashed the streets of Soho, but inside it was a different climate. The 10,000 square foot space was packed a sweltering, humid jungle of perfume, champagne, and ambition. The black marble floors gleamed. The smoked glass walls reflected the pulsing lights. And the giant 4K video wall behind the main stage played a hypnotic loop of Dante himself. Dante on a speedboat, Dante in a bespoke suit, Dante laughing with a beautiful woman, all intercut with the stylized R logo. Bianca Wells, in a silver-sequined gown, stood near the door, air-kissing Vogue editors and whispering in the ears of Times columnists. "Isn't it divine?" she trilled. "He built this all himself, from nothing, a true visionary." The champagne was Bollinger, not the pedestrian verve he once drank. The hors d'oeuvres were passed by models, not waiters. Every detail was designed to scream unapologetic luxury. And at the center of it all was Dante. He was magnificent. He wore a custom white Tom Ford suit, a stark, angelic contrast to the store's dark palace aesthetic. He hadn't just arrived, he had descended. He moved through the crowd, a god among mortals. Every camera flash was a prayer. Every fawning compliment was a hymn. He saw Irina and Katya, the models from St. Bart's, and blew them a kiss. He saw the CEO of West Third Capital, a man named Mr. Peterson, who was in reality a high-level employee of Aura Tech's financial division, and clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it. Peterson," Dante boomed over the music. "The new kings of New York, all you Mr. Russo." Peterson smiled a perfectly neutral corporate smile. At 9:00 p.m., Bianca Wells tapped a microphone. The music dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man you've all been waiting for, the creative force, the visionary, the mogul, Dante Russo." The crowd erupted. Dante strode onto the low stage, taking the microphone. He was bathed in a single, brilliant, white spotlight. He looked out at the sea of faces, at the cameras, at the entire world that was here to worship him. He felt a surge of power, so pure, so absolute, that he almost laughed. He had won. He had won. Wow. He breathed into the mic, a perfect imitation of humility. He waited for the applause to die down. "Thank you. Thank you so much. What a night." He paused, looking up, as if gathering his thoughts. This was the speech he had been rehearsing in his head for 6 months. "They said I was just a face." He began, his voice a low, velvety purr. "They said I was just a kept man, a decoration." A sympathetic awe rippled through the front row. "They said I didn't have a thought in my head, that I didn't have a voice. They tried to put me in a gilded cage." He shook his head, a small, sad smile playing on his perfect lips. "But a cage, even a gilded one, is still a cage. But look around," he said, his voice rising, gesturing to the opulent store. "This is my empire. This is my vision. This was built on my back. With my integrity." He was high on his own supply, feeding off the energy, the flashes, the pure, uncut adoration. "No one can take this from me," he declared, his voice ringing with triumph. "Tonight we celebrate not just a brand. We celebrate freedom. We celebrate authenticity. We celebrate me." He raised his hand, gesturing for his glass of champagne, ready for the toast. "So I say, to Russo." And as he said the name, as the word Russo left his lips, the giant 4K screens behind him, the ones playing his own beautiful face, flickered. The audio in the room cut. The pulsing music, the chatter, all of it gone. A high-pitched feedback whine screeched for a single agonizing second. Dante flinched, annoyed. A technical glitch on his night. "Paolo!" He snapped into the darkness at his tech guy. The screens went black. The store was plunged into a disorienting spotlight and shadow silence. The crowd murmured confused. And then the screens lit up again. But it wasn't Dante's face. It was Madeline Hayes. She was not in a studio. She was in her office at Aura Tech, the one with the panoramic view of the city. She wore a simple navy blue dress. No jewelry, save for a small practical watch. She looked directly into the camera, not with anger, but with the profound, tired disinterest of a CEO about to liquidate a failed asset. Dante froze. His hand holding the microphone hung limply at his side. This was not a live feed. It was a pre-produced statement released simultaneously as phones in the audience began to buzz to Bloomberg, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, and every major news network on Earth. "Good evening." Madeline's voice filled the store, clinically clear and cold. "For those of you attending the launch of the RUSSO brand I offer a correction." The crowd was utterly silent. Bianca Wells was staring, her face a mask of horror. "Mr. Russo speaks of his vision, his empire. Let's clarify its origins." Dante's heart began a low, painful drumbeat against his ribs. This wasn't possible. She wouldn't. "The victory. First," Madeline continued, "the $100 million settlement Mr. Russo boasts of. He has painted this as a victory over my family, a testament to his negotiating skill. The truth is simpler." On the screen, a document appeared, a wire transfer confirmation from a legacy trust. This was a disbursement from a trust my late father established, a trust which by its own bylaws I am legally barred from contesting. It was not a settlement. It was a scheduled distribution. It was in essence an expensive but necessary pest removal fee. A collective gasp. Dante felt the blood drain from his face. Pest. The whistleblower. Second. Madeline said, the narrative of Mr. Russo as a whistleblower. The claim that he left his wife upon discovering financial impropriety, in her philanthropic foundation. A new document appeared, a bank record from Nautilus Holdings. This is the shell company Mr. Russo discovered. He was right to be alarmed. It was being used for fraud, because he was the one committing it. A timeline flashed on screen. January 10th. Dante Russo meets with Bianca Wells. Apex Global account is activated. January 14th. Bianca Wells receives a $54,000 consulting wire from Apex. February 1 to 5th. Dante Russo presents routine tax forms to his wife. February 7th. The first of 3 illegal wire transfers totaling $12 million is moved from the Serafina Foundation to Nautilus Holdings using the signatures he fraudulently obtained. March 20th. Dante discovers the fraud and demands a divorce. He did not leave because of the fraud, Madeline stated, her voice slicing through the air. The fraud was the pretext for his leaving. It was a meticulously planned 6-month campaign of embezzlement and character assassination, designed for a single purpose: to extort a 9-figure settlement. Dante was no longer breathing. He was a statue carved from ice. "He's lying," a woman shouted from the crowd. It was Bianca Wells, her PR instincts on autopilot. "This is slander. This is the Empire." "Third," Madeline Hayes continued, as if Bianca hadn't spoken. "The Russo brand itself. Mr. Russo has claimed he built this from nothing." A new set of logos appeared on the screen. West Third Capital, Patagonia Equity. Mr. Russo secured $75 million in seed capital from an investment firm called West Third Capital, a firm, he was told, whose primary limited partner was Patagonia Equity. Madeline leaned forward slightly. This was the killing blow. Patagonia Equity is a wholly owned subsidiary of Aura Tech Global. It is my personal holding company. Mr. Russo, Dante, has not been building his empire for the last 6 months. He has been building mine. Dante's knees buckled. He grabbed the microphone stand to steady himself. No. Peterson. He looked wildly for the investor, but Peterson was already gone. "I have been for the last 180 days the sole investor, primary creditor, and silent owner of Russo. I funded his store. I paid for his models. I own the lease on this building. I even, through a third party, paid for the very champagne you are drinking tonight." A man in the front row looked at his glass of Bollinger and set it down on a tray as if it were poison. "The execution. Mr. Russo made a single critical error," Madeline concluded. "He believed that because my daughter was kind, she was weak, and that because I was silent, I was absent." The image on screen changed. It was no longer Madeline. It was the granite steps of the New York County District Attorney's office. As of 9:00 p.m. Eastern, Madeline's voiceover continued, "A full criminal complaint with all accompanying evidence has been filed with the DA's office for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement which Mr. Russo thought he had invalidated contains a standard morality clause. But it also contains a fraud clause. Any act of fraud committed against Ms. Hayes or her interests voids all settlement payments present and future." The $100 million settlement was gone. "And finally," she said, "as the sole owner of Russo, I am effective immediately dissolving the brand, terminating all associated employment, and voiding the lease on this property. The company is bankrupt. The empire is closed. Madeline's face reappeared. She looked for the first time directly at Dante, as if she could see him through the lens. "Enjoy the party, Dante," she said. "It's the last one you'll ever have that you didn't steal." The screens went black. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the $20 million store was the hiss of the air conditioning. Dante Russo stood on the stage, a ghost in a white suit. The spotlight was still on him, but it no longer illuminated. It interrogated. Then the first phone. A New York Times push alert. Breaking Madeleine Hayes dissolves Russo. Brand accuses founder Dante Russo of multi-million-dollar fraud. Every head in the room bent down, their faces lit by the blue glow of their screens. They read. They looked up at Dante. They read again. There was no anger, no shouting, just the cold, final judgment of the elite. He was no longer a mogul. He was no longer a man. He was a story. A bad one. Bianca Wells was the first to move. She didn't run. She gathered her clutch, smoothed her dress, and walked calmly toward the exit, already dictating a text to her lawyer. The Vogue editor followed. Then the Times columnist. Then the celebrities, their security details, parting the crowd. Within 3 minutes, the coronation had become a crime scene. Dante was left alone on the stage. The models who had been passing hors d'oeuvres had vanished, their trays abandoned. The only people left were a few bewildered tech guys and a Page 6 photographer who was snapping pictures with a rabid intensity. Click, flash, click, flash. The flashes caught the single tear that rolled down Dante's cheek, a perfect crystalline drop of despair. It caught the moment he finally completely understood. He hadn't been defeated. He had been allowed. His victory wasn't a victory. It was a leash. And Madeleine Hayes had just in front of the entire world given it a final neck-snapping yank. He looked at the R logo above the bar. It flickered, and then one by one the lights that formed the letters went out, plunging the store and his life into a total unrecoverable darkness. The aftermath was not a fire. It was a glacier, slow, silent, and absolute. Dante did not walk out of the Soho store. He was escorted. By 10:00 p.m., 2 stone-faced detectives from the DA's white-collar crime unit were waiting for him by the service exit. The Page 6 photographer got the money shot. Dante Russo, his perfect white Tom Ford suit, now splattered with rain, his hands cuffed behind his back, being guided into the back of an unmarked police car. The headline the next morning was simple: shattered. The legal case was a formality. The evidence Madeleine had provided was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that Dante's lawyers, the same ones who had celebrated the $100 million settlement, advised him to take a plea. The Apex Global emails to Bianca Wells proved conspiracy and intent. The Nautilus wire transfers, cross-referenced with the forms Serafina had signed, proved the fraud. Bianca Wells, in a stunning act of self-preservation, turned state's evidence. She gave the DA everything: voicemails, texts, her own war room notes, in exchange for immunity. Her career in PR was over, but she would not go to jail. Dante had no such protection. He was charged with 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, and 1 count of aggravated embezzlement. He pled guilty to all charges. His sentencing was 6 months later. The courtroom was quiet. He wore an off-the-rack suit that hung on his now thin frame. The charisma was gone. The magic was gone. He was just a tired, hollowed-out man. The judge was not kind. "Mr. Russo, you conducted a campaign of calculated cruelty, financial and emotional, against a person whose only crime was to trust you. You disguised theft as romance. This was not a crime of passion. This was a business plan. You are sentenced to 7 to 10 years in a state correctional facility." Dante didn't even flinch. He was already gone. The $100 million pest removal fee was of course clawed back by the state, as were the proceeds from the sale of his McLaren and the Soho loft. He was left with nothing. Less than nothing. He was left with a debt to society he could only pay with time. The Rosso store was liquidated. The black marble was ripped out, the 4K screens sold for scrap. A trendy athleisure brand took over the lease 6 months later. And Serafina. She was not in the courtroom. She was not in New York. On the night of the launch party, she had been as her mother instructed in Peru. She was standing on a different kind of stage, a simple wooden platform in a small, dusty village. She was cutting a blue ribbon, officially opening the Luz del Agua treatment facility. The photos that went out on the wire were a stunning contrast to Dante's. There were no celebrities, no champagne, just Serafina, her hair in a practical braid, smiling a real, genuine smile as a small child drank the first cup of clean, safe water from the new tap. When the news of Dante's arrest broke, her phone lit up. She turned it off. She spent the next 3 days hiking in the Andes, visiting other potential sites, doing the work. When she returned, she did not move back into the Fifth Avenue penthouse. She moved into a modest, by Hayes standards, apartment downtown. She took over the Serafina Foundation, not just as its benefactor, but as its CEO. Her first act was a complete audit. Her second was to install a new board. Her third was to have a very quiet, very firm lunch with her mother. "I am grateful," Serafina told Madeline, "for what you did. You protected me. You protected the family." "It was," Madeline said, "a necessary business decision." "It was," Serafina countered, "a maternal act of war, and I love you for it. But it ends now." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "Oratech will no longer have a seat on my board," Serafina said. "And your CFO will no longer be co-signing my accounts. The foundation is mine, the work is mine, and my mistakes will be mine." Madeline Hayes looked at her daughter. The wallflower was gone. The mouse was gone. Sitting across from her was a woman who had been forged in a crucible of betrayal and had come out steel. "I respect that," Madeline said, and for the first time she wasn't speaking as a mother to a child or a CEO to an heir. She was speaking as an equal. Serafina Hayes became a force. She leveraged her name not as a brand, but as a weapon for good. She became one of the most effective no-nonsense philanthropists of her generation. She never spoke of Dante. She never had to. Her life was the only statement that mattered. Dante Russo became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Where are they now article waiting to be written. He was a face, and then he was a name, and then he was just nothing. A failed asset, liquidated and forgotten, while the empire he tried to con, the empire he tried to ruin, just kept on stronger than ever. The story of Dante Russo is a brutal reminder that a public victory is not the same as a private win. He had all the flash, all the charisma, and all the headlines. He won the media war, but he lost the real one. He forgot that in the world of real power, the loudest person in the room is almost always the weakest. He thought he was playing chess, but Madeline Hayes was playing an entirely different game, one where she owned the board, all the pieces, and the clock. He flaunted his $100 million prize, not realizing it was just bait in a trap that had been set long before he even knew he was prey. It's a chilling real-life drama about the difference between image and power, between noise and strategy. What do you think? Was Madeline's revenge a masterstroke of justice or a cold-blooded corporate execution? If you were gripped by this story of ambition, betrayal, and ultimate takedown, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a story where the mighty don't just fall, they're pushed. Be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell because I have so many more stories like this to share. Thank you for watching.